There are moments in history that the world never forgets. Moments so shocking that even decades later, people still remember exactly where they were when they heard the news. For millions of people around the world, the death of Princess Diana was one of those moments. On the morning of August 31st, 1997, television broadcasts were suddenly interrupted. Radio stations changed their programming. Newspapers rushed to print special editions. One headline spread across the globe: Princess Diana was dead. She was only 36 years old. Within hours, flowers began appearing outside Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace. Not by the hundreds, not by the thousands, but by the millions. People cried openly in the streets. Many described it as losing someone they had never met, yet somehow felt they had always known. Even today, it remains one of the most emotional events in modern history. But here's something many people don't realize. Most of us know how the story ended. Very few know how it began. Because the final hours of Princess Diana's life were nothing like the headlines that followed. There was no sense that history was about to change. No warning that this ordinary summer weekend would become one of the most tragic nights the modern world had ever witnessed. Just hours before the crash, Diana was smiling. She was laughing. She was making plans for the days ahead. The photographs taken that day show a woman who appeared relaxed, comfortable, and, at least on the surface, happy. No one around her could have imagined that they were looking at the final images of one of the most photographed women in history. But the truth is, those last 24 hours were filled with decisions. Small decisions, unexpected delays, changes of plan, moments that seemed completely ordinary at the time. Yet when placed together, they formed a chain of events that could never be undone. Even after decades of investigations, official reports, thousands of newspaper articles, and countless documentaries, people continue asking the same question. Could that night have ended differently? Was it simply a tragic accident? Or was it a series of ordinary choices that slowly led to an extraordinary tragedy? This is not a story about conspiracy theories. It is not a story built on rumors. Instead, we are going to follow the final 24 hours of Princess Diana's life, step by step, minute by minute, using the facts established by official investigations and contemporary reporting. Because when you carefully reconstruct everything that happened, one thing becomes clear. The story is far more heartbreaking than most people ever realized. It begins on a warm summer afternoon in the south of France. A place that looked peaceful, beautiful, almost timeless. No one could have imagined that within a single day, the life of the people's princess would come to an end. And it all started with what appeared to be an ordinary decision. The story begins far from Paris, far from flashing cameras, far from the tunnel that would later make headlines around the world. It begins along the French Riviera. Just 24 hours before the accident, Princess Diana was spending the final days of her summer vacation with Dodi Fayed, the son of Egyptian billionaire Mohammed Al Fayed. Their relationship had become one of the biggest stories of the summer. Only weeks earlier, photographs of the couple relaxing aboard a luxury yacht had appeared on newspaper front pages across the globe. Some people believed they were deeply in love. Others thought their relationship was moving far too quickly. The truth was known only to the two of them. For Diana, that summer represented something she had not experienced in years. Freedom. Just 1 year earlier, her divorce from King Charles had been finalized. For the first time in a long time, she was no longer bound by many of the expectations that had shaped her royal life. She could travel more freely, make her own decisions, spend time with the people she chose, and perhaps begin imagining a different future. Friends later described her as someone who was searching for a new chapter in life. She remained one of the most photographed women on Earth. But privately, she was still trying to find peace. During those final days in the south of France, she appeared noticeably relaxed. She spent time swimming, reading, talking with Dodi, and enjoying moments away from official royal duties. Yet even there, privacy was almost impossible. Every move they made attracted photographers. Boats carrying paparazzi floated nearby. Long camera lenses followed them from the shoreline. Helicopters occasionally circled overhead. For Diana, this was nothing new. She had lived under relentless media attention for nearly 2 decades. But according to people who knew her, she had grown increasingly frustrated with the constant intrusion. She once described the paparazzi as people who could turn even the simplest moment into a global spectacle. Still, she tried not to let it ruin the vacation. On the morning of August 30th, the atmosphere seemed calm. There were no signs of panic, no urgent meetings, no dramatic conversations. Instead, it looked like another ordinary summer day. Later that afternoon, Dodi suggested flying to Paris before returning to London. The trip was originally meant to become a major event. It was expected to be a brief stop, a chance to spend the evening together before Diana flew back to England to reunite with her sons, Prince William and Prince Harry. Those plans mattered deeply to her. According to several accounts, she was looking forward to seeing them. The boys had spent part of the summer with their father, and Diana was expected to meet them again very soon. It was one of the reasons she planned to leave France. Neither she, nor anyone around her, could have imagined that she would never see them again. Late in the afternoon, their private jet landed at Le Bourget Airport, just outside Paris. As soon as the aircraft touched down, word spread quickly among photographers. Within minutes, paparazzi began gathering. The quiet arrival they had hoped for was already disappearing. Instead of finding privacy, they found attention. Every movement was being watched. Every exit was photographed. Every decision suddenly mattered. At first, the plan seemed simple. Spend a few hours in Paris, have dinner, rest for the night, then continue with the next day's schedule. Nothing about it suggested that history was quietly moving toward one of its most tragic moments. But sometimes, history doesn't announce itself. Sometimes, it hides inside ordinary decisions. A change of plans, a different route, one unexpected delay. And before anyone realizes what's happening, everything changes. That evening, one small decision would set the stage for everything that followed. A decision that seemed completely harmless at the time. Yet within just a few hours, it would become one of the most analyzed decisions in modern history. By early evening, Paris was beginning to glow. The streets were filled with tourists. Cafes were crowded. Traffic moved slowly through the city. For most people, it was just another warm Saturday night. For Princess Diana, it would become the final evening of her life. After arriving in Paris, Diana and Dodi headed to the Ritz Hotel, one of the city's most famous luxury hotels. The Ritz was just another 5-star hotel. It was owned by Dodi's father, Mohammed Al-Fayed. Inside, they could finally escape the crowds. At least, that was the plan. Outside the hotel, the situation was very different. Photographers had already gathered. Word had spread quickly that Diana was in Paris. Within minutes, dozens of paparazzi surrounded their entrances. Motorcycles lined the streets. Long camera lenses pointed toward every doorway. Everyone wanted the same photograph. The most famous woman in the world. With the man everyone was talking about. Security watched the growing crowd carefully. Every time a car approached, camera flashes exploded. Every time a door opened, photographers rushed forward. It quickly became clear. Leaving the hotel would not be easy. Inside, Diana appeared calm. According to staff members, she showed no signs of panic. She spoke politely. She smiled. She even chatted with employees as she walked through the hotel. To everyone around her, it seemed like an ordinary evening. But behind the scenes, plans were already changing. Originally, Diana and Dodi intended to have dinner at a fashionable Paris restaurant. The reservation had already been arranged. However, once security teams saw the number of photographers waiting outside, they reconsidered. The risk of creating a public scene was simply too high. Instead, they decided to remain inside the Ritz. It was a small change, one that seemed completely reasonable. Yet it marked the beginning of a series of last-minute decisions. Decisions made under pressure. Decisions made in an attempt to avoid the cameras. Dinner inside the hotel was quiet. Far quieter than the chaos outside. But even there, privacy proved impossible. Every few minutes, hotel staff reported that more photographers had arrived. The crowd was shrinking. It was growing. As the evening continued, security began discussing a different strategy. How could they leave the hotel without being surrounded? Several possibilities were considered. Wait until the crowd became smaller. Leave through the main entrance. Or try something more creative. Eventually, a plan began to take shape. A decoy vehicle would leave through the front entrance. Security hoped the photographers would chase it. Meanwhile, Princess Diana and Dodi would quietly leave through a rear exit. It sounded like a smart solution. Simple, quick, effective. No one imagined that this decision would become one of the most scrutinized moments of their entire investigation. Shortly before midnight, the plan was put into motion. The decoy vehicle pulled away. Almost immediately, many photographers followed it. For a brief moment, it appeared the strategy had worked. Then, through the rear entrance, a black Mercedes-Benz S280 slowly rolled into position. Inside the vehicle were 4 people. The driver, Henry Paul, the Ritz Hotel's acting head of security. In the front passenger seat, Trevor Rees-Jones, a highly experienced bodyguard. In the back, Princess Diana. Beside her, Dodi Fade. The doors closed. The engine started. The Mercedes eased away from the hotel. At first, everything seemed to be going according to plan. But their advantage lasted only moments. Some photographers quickly realized they had been misled. Motorcycles turned around. Scooters accelerated. Cars joined the pursuit. Within minutes, the Mercedes was being followed once again. The driver continued through the streets of Paris, trying to stay ahead, trying to reach Dodi's apartment without attracting more attention. No one inside the car knew that they had already begun the final journey of Princess Diana's life. The roads ahead looked clear. The destination was only a few minutes away. Then, the Mercedes approached their entrance to the Pont de l'Alma tunnel. And in the next few seconds, everything would change forever. Just after midnight, the black Mercedes continued through central Paris. The city was quiet. Streetlights reflected across the wet pavement. Traffic was light. For a brief moment, it seemed they had successfully escaped the crowds outside the Ritz. But they hadn't. Several photographers were still following behind. some on motorcycles, others in cars. The chase continued through the streets, not at the high-speed spectacle that many headlines would later suggest, but fast enough to create an increasingly dangerous situation. Inside the Mercedes, Princess Diana sat in the rear passenger seat. Beside her was Dodie Fade. In front sat bodyguard Trevor Rees-Jones. Behind the wheel, Henry Paul. According to their official French investigation, the Mercedes accelerated as it moved toward the Pont de l'Alma tunnel. Their exact speed has been debated over the years, but investigators concluded that the car was traveling significantly above the posted speed limit. Only seconds remained. The tunnel entrance came into view. Concrete pillars lined the center divider. The lighting changed suddenly as the car entered the underpass. Then, something went terribly wrong. Henry Paul lost control of the Mercedes. The vehicle swerved sharply. It struck the right side of the tunnel, then violently slammed into the 13th concrete pillar. The impact was devastating. The front of the car was almost completely destroyed. The force of the collision was so extreme that debris scattered across the roadway. The sound echoed through the tunnel. Within moments, everything became silent. Henry Paul, the driver, died instantly. Dodie Fade, sitting beside Princess Diana, also suffered catastrophic injuries. He was pronounced dead at the scene. Bodyguard Trevor Rees-Jones, although critically injured, was still alive. His face had suffered severe trauma. Years later, he would become the only survivor of the crash. Princess Diana was also still alive. She had suffered devastating internal injuries, but she was conscious for brief moments. French emergency responders arrived within minutes. The first officers at the scene immediately realized this was no ordinary traffic accident. As rescue workers approached the wreckage, they were stunned. Inside the crushed Mercedes was one of the most recognizable women in the world. Princess Diana, emergency physician Dr. Frédéric Mélis, happened to be driving through the tunnel shortly after the collision. Without realizing who the victim was, he stopped to help. He later recalled seeing a woman struggling to breathe in the back seat. At that moment, he had no idea he was treating the Princess of Wales. Additional emergency crews quickly arrived. French paramedics followed procedures designed to stabilize patients before transport. Unlike some emergency systems, their priority was not immediate departure. Instead, they worked carefully to stabilize Diana at the scene. She suffered multiple internal injuries, including severe trauma to her chest. At one point, her heart stopped beating. Doctors managed to restart it. For a brief time, there was hope. The rescue operation lasted far longer than many people expected. Not because of confusion, but because Diana's condition was so unstable. Every movement carried enormous risk. Finally, she was transported to the Pitié-Salpêtrière hospital. The ambulance moved slowly through the streets of Paris. Medical staff continued treating her throughout the journey. Inside the ambulance, doctors fought to keep her alive. Outside, very few people yet understood the scale of what had happened. News agencies had begun reporting that Princess Diana had been involved in a serious car accident. But no one knew how serious. Around the world, families were sleeping, completely unaware that history was unfolding in Paris. Meanwhile, inside the operating room, surgeons were doing everything they could. They worked for hours, attempting to repair the catastrophic internal damage caused by the collision. Despite every effort, the injuries were simply too severe. In the early hours of August 31st, 1997, Princess Diana was pronounced dead. She was 36 years old. Within minutes, phone calls began reaching government officials. The British Embassy, Buckingham Palace, Prime Minister Tony Blair, and members of the royal family. The news spread quietly at first. Then, it spread everywhere. By sunrise, their entire world knew. The people's princess was gone, but while millions mourned, another story was just beginning. Because almost immediately, questions began to emerge. Questions about the driver. Questions about the photographers. Questions about their investigation. And questions that, nearly 3 decades later, some people are still asking today. Within hours of the crash, the world wanted answers. How could one of the most protected and recognizable women on Earth die in what appeared to be an ordinary car accident? Almost immediately, French authorities launched a full investigation. Every detail would be examined, every witness interviewed, every piece of evidence collected. But as investigators began reconstructing the events of that night, they discovered a story that was far more complicated than anyone had expected. One of the first questions centered on the driver, Henry Paul. He had worked at the Ritz Hotel for years. He was familiar with Paris. He knew the city's streets, and he had driven VIP guests many times before. So why had he lost control? Toxicology reports later found that Henry Paul had a blood alcohol concentration well above France's legal driving limit at the time. Investigators also reported the presence of prescription medication in his system. These findings became a central part of their official conclusion. According to French investigators, his impaired condition, combined with excessive speed, played a major role in causing the crash. But that was the only question. Attention quickly turned toward the photographers. Several paparazzi had been following the Mercedes through Paris. Some arrived at the crash site within seconds. Instead of helping immediately, many continued taking photographs. Those images would never be officially released. The public reaction was immediate. People around the world were outraged. The photographers were widely criticized for continuing to document the scene, while emergency responders worked to save lives. French police detained several photographers for questioning. For a time, many believed criminal charges would follow. But after extensive investigations, authorities concluded there was insufficient evidence to hold them legally responsible for causing the collision. That decision sparked another wave of public debate. Could the crash have happened without their relentless pursuit? Or had the photographers created an environment that made tragedy almost inevitable? Investigators examined traffic patterns, witness statements, vehicle damage, surveillance footage, and forensic evidence from inside the tunnel. Their official investigations in both France and the United Kingdom ultimately reached similar conclusions. The crash resulted from a combination of factors: the driver's impairment, excessive speed, and the failure of several occupants to wear seat belts. One detail received enormous attention. Princess Diana was not wearing a seat belt. Neither was Dodi Fade. Trevor Rees-Jones, the only survivor, was wearing his, although he suffered life-changing injuries. Investigators concluded that the seat belt almost certainly saved his life. Experts later estimated that if everyone in the rear seats had been properly restrained, the outcome might have been very different. It became one of the most painful what-if questions surrounding the tragedy. Then came another investigation. Years later, British authorities launched Operation Paget, one of the most extensive investigations ever conducted into the death of Princess Diana. Detectives reviewed thousands of documents, interviewed hundreds of witnesses, examined years of speculation, and carefully evaluated numerous conspiracy claims that had circulated around the world. Their conclusion remained consistent with the earlier French findings. There was no credible evidence that the crash had been planned. No evidence of an organized plot. No evidence supporting claims of assassination. Instead, their investigation concluded that it was a tragic traffic collision caused by a combination of human decisions and unfortunate circumstances. Yet, for many people, those conclusions did not end the questions. Perhaps because Princess Diana was unlike anyone else. She was simply a member of the royal family. She was a global icon, a humanitarian, a mother, a woman whose every move had been followed by millions. When someone like that dies so suddenly, many people struggle to accept that their explanation could be so ordinary. Sometimes, history's greatest tragedies are not the result of a single dramatic event. Sometimes, they are the result of several ordinary decisions, made over just a few short hours. A delayed departure, a different route, a driver chosen at the last minute, a seat belt left unfastened. Each decision, insignificant on its own. Together, they changed history forever. But while investigators searched for answers, the rest of the world was beginning to grieve. And their response that followed was unlike anything Britain had ever seen. Millions of people, who had never met Princess Diana, felt as though they had lost someone from their own family. Because her story had become their story, and what happened over the next few days would forever change the relationship between the British royal family and the people they served. Before sunrise, the news had already crossed continents. Television networks interrupted their regular programming. Radio stations stopped the music. Breaking news banners appeared across screens around the world. Princess Diana was dead. At first, many people refused to believe it. Their reports seemed impossible. Only hours earlier, she had been photographed smiling in Paris. Now, the most famous woman in the world was gone. As morning arrived in Britain, people quietly began making their way toward Kensington Palace. Some carried flowers. Others brought handwritten letters. Many came with nothing at all, except tears. No one had organized the gathering. There were no announcements, no invitations. People simply came, by the hundreds, then the thousands, then the hundreds of thousands. Within days, the sea of flowers stretched for what seemed like miles. Bouquets covered the gates. Cards were tucked between the flowers. Children left teddy bears. Families stood silently together. Strangers hugged one another. The silence itself became unforgettable. Many people who were there later described an atmosphere unlike anything they had ever experienced. It felt less like a public event, and more like a nation mourning a member of its own family. Across Britain, churches opened their doors. Books of condolence filled page after page. Candles burned throughout the night. Around the world, tributes poured in from presidents, prime ministers, actors, musicians, athletes, and ordinary people whose lives had somehow been touched by Diana's compassion. For years, she had used her position to shine a light on causes many others ignored. She embraced children with serious illnesses. She comforted people living with HIV at a time when fear and misunderstanding were widespread. She walked through active minefields to raise awareness about the dangers left behind by war. She shook hands with those society often avoided, not for publicity, but because she believed every person deserved dignity. To millions, that was the Diana they remembered. Not a princess hidden behind palace walls, but a woman who reached out to people who needed hope. Then came another moment that changed history. British Prime Minister Tony Blair addressed the nation. In his statement, He used a phrase that would forever become part of Diana's legacy. He called her the People's Princess. Those 3 words spread across the world within hours. For many, they perfectly captured why Diana had meant so much to so many. But while public grief continued to grow, criticism also began to emerge. Many people questioned the response of the royal family. At the time, Queen Elizabeth II remained at Balmoral Castle in Scotland with Prince William and Prince Harry. The family's priority was protecting the 2 young princes after the loss of their mother. However, because the royal family stayed away from London during those first days, some members of the public believed they appeared distant. Television commentators began asking difficult questions. Newspapers demanded a stronger public response. The pressure grew with each passing day. Eventually, Queen Elizabeth II returned to London. In a rare live television address, she spoke directly to the nation. She paid tribute to Diana, not only as a princess, but as an extraordinary and gifted human being. For many people, the speech helped ease tensions during an incredibly emotional time. Then came the funeral, September 6, 1997. An estimated 2.5 billion people watched the ceremony around the world. It remains one of the most watched live broadcasts in television history. The streets of London fell almost completely silent as Diana's coffin, covered with the royal standard, moved slowly through the city. Walking behind it were 4 figures: Prince Charles, Prince Philip, Earl Spencer, and 2 young boys: Prince William, just 15 years old, Prince Harry, only 12. The image of the 2 brothers walking behind their mother's coffin became one of the defining photographs of an entire generation. Years later, both would speak openly about how difficult that walk had been. Inside Westminster Abbey, thousands gathered to say goodbye. Then, the music began. Elton John performed a rewritten version of Candle in the Wind. The performance was quiet, heartbreaking, and unforgettable. Across the world, millions of viewers watched through tears. As the service continued, Diana's brother, Earl Spencer, delivered a eulogy that would become one of the most discussed speeches in modern British history. He spoke about Diana's kindness, her humanity, her devotion as a mother, and the challenges she had faced while living under constant public attention. When the ceremony ended, the crowds remained silent. No cheering, no applause, only grief. It seemed as though an entire generation had paused to say goodbye to someone they felt they truly knew. Yet even after the flowers faded and the funeral ended, Princess Diana's story was far from over, because her legacy would continue to shape the royal family, the media, and the world itself for decades to come. And perhaps that is the greatest reason why the world has never forgot her. For many people, Princess Diana's story ended in a Paris tunnel. But history tells a different story, because her greatest impact didn't come from the way she died. It came from the way she lived, and from everything that changed after she was gone. In the weeks following her funeral, Britain found itself asking difficult questions, not only about the accident, but about the relationship between the monarchy, the media, and the people. The public expected something different from the royal family. Not just tradition, not just ceremony, but emotion, compassion, humanity. It became clear that the monarchy could no longer remain distant during moments of national grief. Many historians believe Princess Diana's death marked a turning point, a moment that forever changed how the royal family communicated with the public. In the years that followed, Members of the monarchy became noticeably more open. They appeared more frequently among ordinary people. They spoke more personally during times of tragedy. And they slowly embraced a more modern image. Whether intentional or not, Diana had changed the institution she had once struggled to fit into. But perhaps her greatest legacy wasn't political. It was personal. Long before it became common, Diana challenged the way the world viewed compassion. She sat beside patients living with AIDS, at a time when many people were still afraid to touch them. She visited hospitals, homeless shelters, children's charities, refugee camps, and active minefields, not because cameras were there, but because she believed forgot people deserved to be seen. One photograph, taken years before her death, shows Diana walking through an active minefield in Angola, wearing protective equipment, surrounded by warning signs. That single image traveled around the world. It changed public opinion and helped build international support for banning anti-personnel landmines. Today, many historians consider it one of the most influential humanitarian photographs ever taken. Her work inspired countless charities, volunteers, and future members of the royal family, including her own sons. Prince William and Prince Harry have both continued many of the charitable causes that meant so much to their mother. In different ways, both have spoken openly about the influence she had on their lives, not as a princess, but as a mother, someone who wanted them to understand the lives of ordinary people, someone who insisted they experience the world beyond palace walls. Years after Diana's death, Prince William once said that he hoped to make his mother proud. Prince Harry has often described her memory as a guiding force throughout his life. Her influence continues to shape both men to this day. And then, there was the media. Princess Diana's death forced newspapers, television networks, and photographers to confront uncomfortable questions. How far should the pursuit of a story go? When does public interest become an invasion of privacy? Where should the line be drawn? Those questions are still being debated today. In many ways, they began with Diana. Nearly 3 decades have passed. A new generation has grown up. Many people watching this video today were not even born when Princess Diana died. And yet, her story continues to captivate millions. Books continue to be written. Documentaries continue to be produced. Old interviews continue to be rediscovered. Why? Perhaps because Diana represented something rare. She lived inside one of the world's oldest institutions, yet seemed deeply connected to ordinary people. She possessed extraordinary fame, but longed for an ordinary life. She wore a crown, yet often appeared happiest when comforting someone who had nothing. That contradiction made her unforgettable. Even today, her photographs remain instantly recognizable. Her speeches continue to inspire. Her humanitarian work is still remembered. And every year, people continue placing flowers at Kensington Palace, not because they are remembering the accident, but because they are remembering the woman, the people's princess. History often remembers people for the way they die. Princess Diana became unforgettable because of the way she lived. And perhaps that is the real story behind her final 24 hours. Not that the world lost a princess, but that it lost someone who had changed what a princess could be. Thank you for watching. If this story helped you understand Princess Diana's legacy in a new way, please consider subscribing for more in-depth documentaries about the people and moments that changed history. And now we'd like to hear from you. What do you think is Princess Diana's greatest legacy? Share your thoughts in the comments below.